In this episode, I'm going to cover horizontal layouts. I'll start by configuring the horizontal layout container, and then I'll cover sizing with the width and the height. And then I'll talk about how doubles are sized as percentages and integers are sized as specific sizes. And then -1, -1 means natural sizing or delegates the sizing to the children. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to minimize this and go to the guide in GXT, and I'm in the horizontal layout. And I just want to briefly cover the sizing right off the bat. So we have horizontal layout data, and I'm going to talk about this in an example next. But minus or 0.5 is going to be a double, and that's going to be 50%. And that's going to be a width and a height. Well, let's look at that in detail. And then if it's going to be 0.3, that's going to be 30%. And 1 is going to be an integer, but that's going to be 100%. Okay, so then if we have 100 px or 200 px, that's going to be 100 or 200. And then if we look at -1, that's going to mean I'm going to delegate that sizing to the child, either width or height. I'm going to say the child is responsible for that. So if I say -1 or -1, that's going to be -1, and that's going to be natural sizing in a sense of the children is responsible for that. And the children might be going, I'm only going to be the size that I naturally have, and I'm going to say the content is going to wrap itself. Okay, so there's an example down here. If we look at this, we're going to have 1, and that's going to be 100% width, and 0.5 is going to be 50% height. So it's going to take up the available size of the parent. And keep that in mind, the parent has to have that size available. So it's going to have some size, and I'll cover that in greater detail. Okay, so let's go to the IDE, and we're going to make a container that shows that example here. So I'm going to start with the root panel. Panel.get gets the body.add, and I'm going to add a viewport. And why am I adding the viewport? The viewport is going to be the root widget, which passes on the window size, and I covered this in greater detail in the previous episodes. Viewport equals new viewport. And the viewport, I'm going to add an HLC, and that's going to be my horizontal layout container. Horizontal layout container. Container. HLC equals new horizontal layout container. Okay, so my HLC, I'm going to auto import with Command Shift O in this case, and I made a mistake in spelling. And there we go. So I fixed that. So the HLC, I want to add some items to it because it has, well, let's go back to the guide real quick here. And I'm going to look at layout container guide. And if I go down and look at the graph, and in the graph, I can see the layout container falls under, it should be under insert resize container. And here it is, horizontal layout container. So it's one of the blue, and it's a resizing container. So this is great reference to keep in mind. So let's go back and go 8, and we're going to add. What I want to do is have a left, a middle, and a right container. So HLC.add, and we'll go left, and we'll make that a simple container here in a moment. And then I'm going to go new horizontal layout data. And I'm going to choose 100 pixels wide and a height of 100%. And then I'm going to add a margin here of 20 pixels. And then terminate that line and auto import. And I didn't use correct syntax there. Okay, margins, I think. Auto import. Okay, let's just do a control or command click on add, and we can see we're looking at a child and horizontal layout data, and then I'm going to look at horizontal layout data, and I'm using this constructor overload here, and it's going to have a width, height, and margins. Okay, so margins, by the way, you can be more specific here. You can have a top, left, right, and such in bottom. Okay, so I'm going to copy this because I'm going to have 3 of them. Left, middle, and right. Okay, so what I want to do is make that a simple container, and I just want to simply express in this tutorial so it's easy to understand what we're doing here. And as the tutorials go on, the episodes go on, we'll get a little bit more complex in the options you can use in your layouts. Okay, so this is going to be left equals new simple container. Auto import that. And okay, I'm going to copy this 3 times. And that is going to be middle and right. Okay, and I want to give them a border. Otherwise, it's going to be white. There's not going to be any fun to look at because we won't be able to understand it in a browser. So I want to give it a border. This is great for debugging, by the way. So I'm going to say, whoop, I don't want to add there. What I want to do is get element because I just want to use some inline styles to show how this. In a future episode, I'll talk about CSS resources and how we can get assign the CSS classes to the widget, which is an element. Okay, or depending on the widget, there might be multiple elements in the widget. We'll talk about that in greater detail in the future episodes. So get style, which is the inline style. And then we're going to go set property because I want to set a border. And then the border is going to be 1px solid. Let's do brown. And then I'm going to copy this, give the middle, and then I got to rename it as in right and middle. Let's give it different colors here, purple and blue. Save that. Let's look at that. Okay, so we have an HLC with 3 items. And they're going to be, let's change the sizes here. I forgot to do the middle because I want the middle to take up the 100% of the available size. And then the bottom, let's make it different than the top. So let's say 75. And then this is 100 pixels, 100%, and 75 pixels. And they're all 100% high. Okay, so then we can save this and then we'll debug it. We started a launcher in the previous episode, so I already have one created. I'll select that launcher. It starts up a super dev mode process, which copies the resource to the web app directory. And then we'll get a link here, double click on the link, and starts up an SDBG browser. And here we go. On the left, let's look at that. Left, I have 100 pixels. In the middle, I have 100% by 100%. And on the right, I have 75 pixels. So now I can resize it. And that's pretty cool. The viewport sends the size to the HLC. So that covers basically how to configure a horizontal layout container and give its children specific layout data to size accordingly. And it could be a tree of layout. Keep in mind that layout could be passed on within the child of the HLC too. This simple layout container can pass the size to its children as well. Well, in the case of a simple, it's one child, and then its child could have multiple children. So the layout sizing could be a tree. Okay, so that concludes this episode on the horizontal layout container. Thanks for watching today. Follow me for more tips and tricks on GXT, and I'll catch you later.